Hello, everybody. I sure hope that you're doing well this week. You know, here we are already into the second half of January. Doesn't seem possible. Seems like Christmas was just a few days ago, but we're already rapidly moving through January. We've had some sunshine this week. I hope you've been able to enjoy that and you've had a good week. You know, when I read the Bible, I see that it's full of people who were able to thrive during times of chaos. I look at the New Testament and I look at the life of the Apostle Paul, and he seemed especially capable of thriving in chaos. You know, Paul was hated by the Jewish religious leaders. He was hated by the Romans. He was even hated by other people in the church. Yet through his ministry, countless churches were started, and Paul was able to disciple many, many people. That was in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, I see Joseph, and Joseph thrived in being sold into slavery by his own brothers. He was able to thrive so much so that he became second in command in all of Egypt, only number two behind the Pharaoh. So Joseph was able to thrive in chaos. When I read the book of Esther, I see that Esther was able to thrive in chaos also, because she rose from being a young slave woman to become queen of the Persian Empire, even while in the midst of the chaos of evil men plotting to have the Jewish people exterminated. So Esther was able to thrive in the midst of her chaos. I think of Daniel. Daniel thrived in chaos. He was taken into slavery to Babylon. He had a death sentence pronounced upon him, and yet somehow he won favor with the king of Babylon. So these were people who learned how to thrive in the midst of chaos. You and I, we find ourselves in our country in chaos right now. It's been going on for about the last year, and I believe it's a great, great opportunity for Christians to thrive. I say that because of how David thrived during the chaos of his life. You know, you and I, we can learn some important things by looking at what David wrote and what helped him to thrive when others might have faltered. I believe that David demonstrates that it's a mindset, it's an attitude, and it's our convictions that help us to thrive in chaos. And I believe that we see this in Psalm 37. That's what I'd like to look at today. The first 7 verses of Psalm 37. I don't know, maybe you have a Bible with you there where you are, and if you want to, go ahead and turn to Psalm 37. We'll be looking again at the first 7 verses of what David wrote about how he was able to thrive in the midst of chaos. So we're going to begin verses 1 and 2 of Psalm 37. This is what David wrote. He says, "Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb." From that, I think David is saying this: stop focusing on what's causing the chaos. People doing evil things is what was causing chaos in David's life, and I think that can be said, at least to some degree, in our country right now. Stop focusing on what's causing the chaos. And you know what's really interesting here? That word that David uses, envious, here, where he says, "Be not envious of evildoers." The Hebrew word for envious is kana, Q-A-N-A, and it means this. It means provoke to. So from that, I get the sense that what David is saying is stop allowing people doing wrong to provoke you to worry and fear and anxiety. You know what? David had plenty of this in his life. King Saul was trying to kill him. Some of his own family had betrayed him. David is certain, he writes about it here, he is certain that those people, they're going to fade away. So that's one of the first steps in thriving in chaos. Stop focusing on what's causing the chaos. Now, David continues writing in the next verse, Psalm 37, verse 3. This is what he writes. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. So I was wondering, here's a little question for you. Do you know how long it was from the time God had anointed David to become king of Israel until the time that David actually became king of Israel? Well, scholars and theologians tell us they believe it was about 15 years. You know, David had an attitude, and he writes about it here, that he was going to trust God and God's timing for him to become king. David refused to kill King Saul and usurp the kingdom from him. He could have done that easily, but he was committed to not doing it and let God do the things that God wanted to do. Do you know what David did during that entire time that King Saul was hunting him down and trying to kill him? He did good. He helped people. He provided care and protection for people. David welcomed people who were marginalized and outcasts to become part of his community. Even though bad things were happening to him, he did good things. David says, dwell in the land. Don't leave the land, dwell in the land. Sometimes during chaos, we want to look for another place where there isn't chaos rather than trying to find out how God can cause us to thrive in the midst of our chaos. You know, David did that at one point. He went to the Philistines and tried living among the Philistines. And you know what? Things for him weren't any better when he was with the Philistines. David says in this verse, befriend faithfulness. The Hebrew translation of that phrase is this. It means feed on faithfulness. Feed on God's faithfulness. Trust God. When you can't trust anybody else, trust God. Doesn't that seem like the place we find ourselves these days? Who can you trust? David says, trust God. That's another step in thriving in chaos. You continue to do good and trust God. Well, David continues writing in the next verse, Psalm 37, verse 4. This is what David says. He writes, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Sometimes in the chaos, we think to ourselves, if only this can happen, or if only this person will do this, things will be better. We might also think, if only we can get the right politician in office, if only we can get leaders who think our way, if only we can stop others from doing what they're doing, if only, if only, if only. David says, delight yourself in the Lord. And David was able to do that throughout his chaos. You know, David wrote nearly half of the Psalms in the book of Psalms. And it's what we see him doing consistently. It was his conviction. Regardless of what was going on around him, he would find delight in God. Not in anybody else, not in King Saul, not in another person. he would find delight in God. If you delight yourself in the Lord, as David says here, and he promises to give you the desires of your heart, what do you think the desires of your heart will be? Well, I'm convinced that it will be the Lord. If God is what I find myself delighting in, my desire will be to find more delight in God. It won't be for anything else. Let me ask you, in all the chaos of the last year in our country, have you sought delight in God? If you haven't, if I haven't, then we're seeking delight in something else. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's an ideology. Maybe it's something else. It's another step that David gives us in being able to thrive in chaos, and that is delight yourself in the Lord. Nothing else. Delight yourself in the Lord. Now, David continues writing in Psalm 37, verse 5. This is what he writes. He writes, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." You know, I don't know that David could put it much simpler than he does here. Commit your way to the Lord, not to politics, not to a politician, not to an ideology. Commit your way to God. Trust him to act in the way he knows is best. Let's face it, God knows much more than I do. God knows much more than you do. He knows exactly what is needed in the chaos, and we don't. We might think that we do, but we don't know exactly what is needed. This is another step that David was aware of how to thrive in chaos. Commit your ways to the Lord. David continues writing in the next verse, Psalm 37, verse 6. This is what he writes. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. If we'll do all those things that David mentions, we won't be adding to the chaos of everything. We'll shine like lights of righteousness in the darkness of the chaos. You know what? People notice shining things. People notice bright things. People notice glowing things. They'll notice you and I are different than those causing and caught up in the chaos, and perhaps wonder why we are different. In David's chaos, people flocked to him because he gave them some reason for hope, for a better future. You know something? Jesus wrote this in the Sermon on the Mount. He spoke it in the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5, verse 14, Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." I'm wondering, are you light in the chaos? Or have you lost your glorious glow that reflects Jesus? You know what? You and I are purveyors of the gospel, the good news that God can overcome evil, that people can have the abundant life that Jesus came to give us, even in the middle of chaos. David finishes this part of Psalm 37 by writing in verse 7, he writes this, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his ways, over the man who carries out evil devices." Trust God. Wait for him to act in the chaos. And I know that is hard and difficult and challenging. Stop worrying about those who might be doing evil. That's what David did. He stopped worrying about it. King Saul was doing evil. David, however, continued to do good. He continued to trust God. He waited on God. He turned his worrying into prayer and a delight for God. And he became king. Well, there you have it. Psalm 37. David giving us a little bit of an understanding of how he was able to thrive in the chaos of his life. I hope you and I will do the same thing, that we'll learn how to thrive in the midst of the chaos. Jesus said that you are the light of the world. I hope you let your light shine so that people can see Jesus inside of you. Till the next time, God bless you. We'll see you soon.